Hey, what's up, YouTube? This is Lucifer Legaborden coming back at you with another video. Obviously from the basement, so you know what the subject already is. It's going to be Satanism. But this is going to be a little bit interesting here. Now, as many of you know, I consider myself a type of LaVeyan, what I like to call a classical LaVeyan, or LaVeyan, also sometimes called a theistic LaVeyan. That last one strikes as a little bit weird to most LaVeyans, though. As many LaVeyans are in Satanism, they are the original denomination, sort of. LaVeyans, in our modern sense, are atheists, or at least they like to call themselves atheists. In a previous video, I mentioned on how the term atheist cannot be attributed to Satanism. And this is, LaVeyans are the main group who call themselves atheists. I would also say that a lot of Luciferians are now starting to switch over to the atheism side, as well as the temple, or the Satanic Temple, is also claiming to be more atheistic or LaVeyan in nature. But I'm not an atheistic. I'm a theistic, which means I actually do believe in a very real devil. Now, this is going to strike as a little bit of a contradiction to most Satanists out there, especially LaVeyans. It's like, how can you call yourself a LaVeyan of any type and say that you actually believe in a real Satan, in a real devil? Excuse me. Well, it's sort of the same reason why Rex Diabolus left the Church of Satan, because he stated that he actually did believe in a very real devil. And the way that I can best describe it is that at least, I can't really speak for other people who think in the classical LaVeyan or Anton LaVey classic church train of thought. I can't speak for members of the Temple of Set on how they go about it or anything. I can only speak about it from how I look at things individually. And ultimately, that's what most of us Satanists are about. We are individuals. So, the way I look at it is, I look at it as Satan in the real sense of the word, the actual being, the actual deity, Satan, is an externalization of man's inner spirit. Now, how I can best describe that, and I may remake this video later on with a better way of describing it, but how I can best describe it is there is mathematical equations and whatnot that prove with math that anything that can be thought of actually exists in its own secular universe or whatnot, or even in this universe. Your thoughts can actually manifest things. So if we think that Satan is real, if we believe, if we're able to engage our suspension of disbelief, then for us as individuals, he is real. But now, what about on a mass scale? Well, the Christians sort of already made him very real for us Satanists. You think about it, they did the same thing with God, too. Enough people believing in the same thing can manifest it into being. And Satan and God has such a mythology behind them that they have literally become icons. They have their own background. They have their own mythology. And everybody independently who adds to that and whatnot creates new quirks and nuances. And sometimes they become popular theory. Sometimes they don't. And it takes on a life of its own. So, that being said, if it can be proven that by our own thoughts we created God and we created Satan, our belief and our faith in them. Faith is the key word. And I know for Satanists that's like a big no-no keyword because we're supposed to question everything. We're supposed to question everything within reason. But when we enter a ritual chamber here, we're supposed to set aside we're supposed to suspend our disbelief and just live in the moment. So in that moment, when we're in ritual, we can externalize our own inner turmoils, our troubles, our problems, our woes, our joys, everything. We can externalize them in a ritual chamber. And some people will say that they've had weird manifestations. Sometimes they call them demons or whatnot. Who knows? But in a ritual chamber, most Satanists can externalize that. So, on a mass scale, as a group in a large setting or the world over, you take a look at Christianity. The last time I checked, I don't know if it's still correct, but in some form, shape, fashion, be it Judeo-Christian, Islamic, or flat out Christian, the Islamic, the Jews, and the Christians, the three primaries of the Zoroastrian descendants, make up about at least 1/3 of the Earth's religious population in some form of Judeo-Christian variant, believing in the same deities. They believe in God in some shape, fashion, or form. Be it Allah, be it Yahweh, whatever. They have faith in him, and they've attributed so many stories and whatnot to him. They've granted him life. They've granted him existence. And the power, along with that, they've granted him the power to influence their lives. Now, alongside God, they created Satan. And without even meaning to, they granted Satan the power to also influence their lives, although they say that it's for the negative. Well, we all know that the devil has always been the best friend the church has ever had. He's kept people's butts in those pews all these freaking centuries. So, by our own faith and our own belief in a real Satan, we create him as a real anthropomorphic externalized force. And it's not just ours. It's other Christians and whatnot. They're putting their vital energy, their will, and their thought towards these beings and manifesting them in their own lives, granting them power to influence their lives. We've all, anybody who's been in the occult and the craft for many years knows not to mess with that little old biddy in the pew praying on a rosary. She can pack just as much wallop as a coven of witches if her faith is strong enough. As Anton LaVey stated in the 11 Satanic Rules of the Earth, do not question the power of magic if you have employed it with success. And I'm going to pare it down that if you do, you pretty much undo everything you've achieved. And that goes towards whether or not there is a real Satan or not. People have heard me say that, yes, I do believe in a real Satan. Now you understand how that is. I believe in him, but I believe that man created him. Okay? Just like if I was to say that Genesis was true, that God made man, I would have to say man made God first. Okay? So then, man made God first in that sense, so that he could go back. We granted him all this omnipotent power, granted him the ability to go back in time and self-create his own future. Okay, so God made man, but man made God first, so God could go back in time to make man again, to continue the cycle. That is sort of the way that it goes down. ultimately, people have always questioned, if God made man, who made God? Well, there's your answer. If God made man, man made God. It's all self-creating. We gave him the power. We created him with our own faith, our own belief, our own thoughts, and our own creativity to then go back and make us. But at the same time, we also gave him an enemy. We gave ourselves an out. That once we did not need him in our lives to self-create ourselves, we could say, we don't want you anymore. We want out. And so we created a rival for him. And that rival is the Satan, the adversary, the accuser. Whether you call him Satan, Lucifer, Abaddon, Leviathan, whatever name you want to attribute to him, Beelzebub, he is the adversary of God. And we, as human beings, as intellectual human beings, as creative beings ourselves, created these deities, these entities, to help us and influence us in our lives. Sometimes to guide us forward when we need it, sometimes to take on an enemy or some sort of trial and tribulation, whatever in our lives. It doesn't matter if you're Christian, it doesn't matter if you're Muslim, it doesn't matter if you're a Satanist or a Wiccan. Man created most of the deities. Now what's interesting is when we go back in time, we look to some of these pagan beliefs and whatnot. Some of the deities and gods and goddesses in these pagan beliefs were actually based on or were real people at one point in history who elevated themselves to legendary status. We see the same thing in Christianity with the saints, real people who achieved such greatness in their lives that they got elevated to godlike status. Even in our modern society, we elevate our heroes. In Satanism, Satanists hold, and LaVeyans especially, hold Anton LaVey up on a pedestal. He was the founder of our belief. If we look to most neo-Nazi groups, they hold Adolf Hitler up on a pedestal. Okay? We go over to Romania and Transylvania. Vlad Tepes, the Impaler, the feudal 14th century warlord, is still worshipped, prayed to today. He is a saint. They hold him up on a pedestal. So we created these gods. We turned these people into our new gods. If I wanted to, I could, sit before the sigil of the Baphomet and pray to Anton LaVey. I could get LaVey's sigil pentagram and pray to that, to Anton LaVey. And it would be perfectly in line with almost any other religion. This would be a deity that I am creating, that I am holding faith in. It doesn't matter that he was once a living person. It doesn't matter if a deity never lived at all. Man creates their own gods, creates their own deities. We externalize our internal ids and make them, give them power to influence the world around us. Maybe to influence somebody across the country. It all depends on how much potential faith we put in that, how much belief, and how much we are able to engage our suspension of disbelief that brings these beings into our world, that makes them very real to us, both on a personal level and on a mass level. So that is my explanation on how a LaVeyan, like myself, a classical LaVeyan, as I like to call myself, not a modern LaVeyan, a classical LaVeyan, can be theistic at the same time as practicing Anton LaVey's style of Satanism. And even Anton LaVey mentioned it in an article, that sometimes during ritual, he could feel his id, his inner self, separate. When he was actually questioned, as many people often did, do you actually believe in the devil? He was questioned about it, and he was very coy about his answers at all times. He never really said no, he never really said yes. But he did say at one point in time that during rituals, sometimes he could feel that internal creature, so to speak, externalize. And that he was externalizing his id, his inner demon, his inner devil. And that he could converse with it. Whatnot. He acknowledged it outside of the ritual chamber that it was part of his own inner self. But during ritual, at times he could externalize it and imagine that this being was coming out of him to do his bidding, to answer his questions that he may not have been able to think of on his own. So did Anton LaVey believe in an actual Satan? That's a little dodgy. If you look back, he never really answered it wholeheartedly. He never really said no. He never really said yes. He would go into this big, long explanation about things. Did he believe in an actual hell in the sense that people would go and roast in the lake of fire? No, he flat out said, we don't believe in that. He flat out said that here and now is our heaven and our hell. That this is what we should be concerned about. We should not be concerned about what goes on in the afterlife. And I have to agree with him on that. As a person who's been dead, I've seen what's on the other side. I know it's there, and I know not to worry myself with what goes on there, because that is not here. Only when something comes from that realm of existence, something happens there and we get something here, do I worry about what goes on there. Until then, I'm just worried about here. And I'm worried about my own immediate world, my family, myself, my pets, my own personal problems. And of course, my gods. The gods that I create. The gods that I externalize. Am I an atheist? Hell no. I will never call myself an atheist, because I'm not. I am a Satanist. So this is Lucifer Legavorden. Tell me what you think in the comments down below. Please be respectful, of course, when you do so. I will not tolerate anybody trying to tell me to come back to God or whatnot. Of course, I've made a video just telling you exactly why. So please be respectful. I appreciate all the comments I get. Thank you. And I will see you guys later. Hail Satan. I'm out of here.